The Best Picture lineup for the 96 Oscars is considered to be one of the best lineups in recent memory. I mean, it had possibly my favorite movie ever, Poor Things. And when the Oscars came around, I had seen one of the films nominated, and it was not Poor Things, it was Oppenheimer. Genuinely embarrassing. So, this year I course corrected, and I actually got the most of them before the Oscars this time. Look at me, ma, I'm a real cinephile. And I've decided to make this video about the films nominated. The best, the worst, and everything in between. So, let's go. Starting with...
Ayuda, gracias. Yo necesito ayuda limpio.
Oh, Amelia Perez. What haven't you been this award season? The controversy stormed surrounding this film. Oscar bait, controversial frontrunner, being racist and transphobic, director Jack Audiard's racist statements, Paula Sofia Gascon's even more racist tweets. I don't blame anybody for not checking this one out. But to play devil's advocate for a second, I think that the hate for this movie is kinda overblown. I was mildly intrigued by the first 40 minutes or so, and thought the premise of a crime drama musical about a transgender cartel boss was very intriguing. Zoe Saldana does her best to keep this film afloat, and she is easily the best part of the film. The choreography is pretty cool sometimes, and despite what you may hear, Selena Gomez and She Who Shall Not Be Named are fine. At worst, they have some pretty bad vocal moments, but I'm used to that in movie musicals at this point. And that's where the praise ends. This movie is a load of dog shit. The worst part of this movie is not that it's borderline offensive, but that it wastes an interesting premise on such a nothing story. Every character has the depth of a puddle, and whoever wrote this movie has never heard the word subtext in their life. Sloppy cinematography and editing only make this experience more miserable. And the songs all suck. The best song, El Mal, would still be a C-tier song in an actual musical. The others are either too short, too mumblecore, too shit, or this.
Men to woman, or woman to men.
Man to woman.
From penis to vagina.
Thus, the story is entirely unengaging. There's a scene where Zoe Saldana starts breaking down because she starts to realize the weight of her situation, and that's where the film lost me. Absolutely nothing presented in the film built up to this, and the moment feels hollow, like most of the movie is. Don't watch it, 4 out of 10. I'm so glad this lost international feature at the Oscars. But I will say that Amelia Perez makes choices. It is technically a bold swing. Granted, every choice it makes is a bad one, but at least it made a choice, unlike...
Some people are saying that your new music sounds a lot like Bob Dylan.
Well, maybe Bob Dylan sounds a lot like me.
A complete unknown is like if Amelia Perez had actually good songs. Equally unengaging and equally a waste of a good premise, but hey, Bobby Boy can sing. The conflict that Bob Dylan faces of staying safe and cozy in the folk world or chasing artistic merit in the controversial electric world is a strong premise that you could so easily build a great movie off of. Unfortunately, a complete unknown gets stuck in the trappings that plague most musical biopics. Let's be real. The music biopic is no less cookie-cutter and formulaic than your average MCU movie. They all have the same rise and fall and rise again story, the same cinematography, and the same conflicts, whether that be the producers, the drugs, the love interests, whatever. The only difference is that music biopics win Oscars, and thus have remained largely unchecked, leading to some truly useless slop turned out. Looking at you, Bohemian Rhapsody. A complete unknown isn't the most generic, but it can't escape the formula of the music biopic. Too much time is spent on the first half, the significantly less interesting rise to fame of Bob Dylan. It's not that it's actively bad, but that it's been done to death before, and it needs a shake-up to interest me, which it does not do. This leads to a film that only gets interesting after 1 hour of boring setup, and even then, the characters aren't strong enough to carry the movie. Timothée Chalamet puts up a great Bob Dylan performance in acting and singing, but this movie is just not interested in exploring who Bob Dylan is. I know Dylan's whole shtick is that he's an enigma, a complete unknown, if you will. But if that's the case, then the movie really should have explored the people around Bob instead, in my opinion. That would make for a vastly more compelling narrative, and the side characters are already ripe for more character development. And this is really more of a nitpick, but Bob Dylan's voice just absolutely got on my last nerve. He sounds like Tommy Wiseau in The Room, and I know it's accurate, but holy shit is his voice annoying. Going back to the supporting cast, Elle Fanning and Edward Norton are both pretty good, but their characters feel sorely underwritten and underutilized, especially in Norton's case. The real standout from the supporting crowd is Monica Barbaro, who goes toe-to-toe with Timmy in terms of acting and singing. That cover of It Ain't Me, Babe? Heavenly. Awoke me out of my coma, only to put me back in it moments later. But like the rest of the cast, She isn't given the writing she deserves, and thus she is also unengaging, even if I did like her performance. In sum, this is just another boring outing from the music biopic genre, and the few great stuff is great in spite of the genericness of it all. But I will say that Dylan's music is really, really good, and it made the whole thing much more bearable to watch. 4 out of 10. Alright, we got through the only 2 actual stinkers in this list. The rest are all really good, so yay!
But what's this? One new candidate has entered the ring.
I think someone described Conclave as Mean Girls but popes, and I totally agree. Sister Agnes is so Regina George. Just like Mean Girls, Conclave is a very entertaining film with twists and turns galore. For a movie about the Catholic clergy, I was not expecting this movie to be so intriguing. This conclave features many different cardinals vying for the big boy role of the Pope, and they all have strong motivation as well as very compelling secrets each are hiding. What I love most about these popes is how petty they are. Not only does it lead to some very juicy and very well done confrontations between them, but it really emphasizes how far the Catholic Church can fall from its teachings. From a Catholic point of view, the cardinals vying to be the next pope are motivated by their ideals and their desires, forgoing the whole spiritual responsibilities of being pope. The secular view this film takes reinforces the idea that the cardinals are not the just and righteous men of God we assume they are. This, along with the stacked ensemble this movie has, makes the narrative as gripping as it is. And that ensemble, man. Ray Fiennes, Stan Tucci, Isabella Rossellini, John Lithgow, and the rest? Like, come on! But the real star is Edward Berger, the director. I'm surprised he didn't make the cut for Best Director, as his direction is incredibly sharp and precise. Cinematography makes the whole movie feel intensely claustrophobic, with long and narrow hallway shots emphasizing isolation and enclosure. The edit is as precise as the direction, keeping the flow of the film going while also leaving needed room to take a breather. However, the same cannot be said about the score. Genuinely awful and out of place. It's screaming in your face that this scene is tense and exciting. Did you know that? And it became way too overbearing. And it's not even that good. It's just the same piece played over and over again until it's lost any impact it could have. In addition, I think the film is just a little too far up its own ass in terms of tone. It's too focused on trying to tell us that this is the most important event in the history of the world, which comes off as too self-serious and a tad pretentious. I think it needed to lighten up a bit, focusing more on the pettiness and dark comedy aspects, because this shot of Tedesco vaping is a million times more memorable and interesting than Stan Tucci Cardinal saying, "This shit's serious, bro." But I still love Conclave. Pure Vatican pulp, 8 out of 10.
We are having a green. Oh my god, what's inside of me?
Wicked is great in spite of its flaws, and I do mean flaws. There are multiple aspects of Wicked that are really bad. You've probably heard about the piss poor lighting and color grading, and yes, it's really that bad. It's the same problem that the MCU has, where every scene set outside is desaturated to hell, and the lighting is way too glaring. Like, look at this, man. Who approved this? I'm also not sold on John M. Chu as director. He does a great job managing a project at this scale, but in terms of directorial style, it very rarely shows. I think the most apt comparison of Wicked is the Harry Potter series, where both are fantasy series, both have good not great directors, except you, Quaron, and both are horribly lit and color graded. There are little moments throughout that make me question why this movie is lauded as it is. Like, that's best editing material? But Wicked still prevails, despite my reservations going into the film. I'm not the biggest Wicked fan, and my only point of reference is the original Broadway cast recording with Idina Menzel and Christian Shepherd. Based off that, I think Wicked is good not great, but nowhere near my favorites. I've never actually seen Wicked live, so take what I say with a grain of salt. But I think Wicked is a great adaptation. It conserves what's good about the original musical and adds to it, helping make the transition from stage to screen all the more successful. So many movie musicals these days are bad at adapting the musical material, and to see a film like Wicked nail it so well makes my musical-loving soul all the more happier. The musical numbers are just as good as I remember, the production is out of this world spectacular, and it beats any doubts about it being a two-parter. By being 2 parts, this movie has time to breathe and let us get absorbed into the world of Oz, and the shockingly good pacing prevents the movie from being boring or bloated. And crucially, the performances are all excellent. Ignoring the obvious too, Jonathan Bailey exudes so much bisexual charm and style into Fiyero, it's hilarious. And he controls the screen whenever he's on. And I quite like Jeff Goldblum as the wizard. He does the Jeff Goldblum thing, but it works as he feels like a man who is running out of time. And of course, the heart of the film, Elphaba and Glinda. Cynthia Erivo is a ludicrously good singer, and she provides the sass and optimism of a young Elphaba, while also excelling at showing how much pain Elphaba holds back. This is well juxtaposed to Ariana Grande's Glinda, the supporting actress performance of the year. The physicality, the comedy, the singing, and even the emotional moment. She does it all, imbuing what is essentially a Looney Tunes character with such heart and soul. These two together are the reason why this movie is as good as it is. And despite both being semi-controversial figures, they are transcendent together. I'm optimistic for part 2, but I'm going to temper my expectations, as I know nothing in part 2 will ever top Defying Gravity for me. One of the best moments I've ever had in a movie theater. Life-changing. 8 out of 10.
You're going to Brazil!
Not to be that guy, but doing a numerical rank of these movies is kinda silly. I'm Still Here is in the lower half of the nominees, but that is an incredibly misleading statement. I'm Still Here is an emotional masterpiece and completely lives up to the rave reviews I see. Every time the Academy posted on their Instagram, every comment section was flooded with rabid Brazilian fans just hyping up I'm Still Here, as if it was the next Godfather. And I see why. In good old America, I'm not knowledgeable about Brazilian political history at all, but I think I've learned enough to know that the dictatorship Brazil was under during the events of I'm Still Here were oppressive and downright horrific, especially to those who lost family and friends to the regime, and it is captured excellently in I'm Still Here. I'm Still Here is about Eunice Paiva, an opponent of the military dictatorship, who I did not know was a real person, making this movie a biopic. Unlike a certain other biopic on this list, this movie really dives deep into understanding who Eunice was as a person. I love the first act of this film, where we're just placed into the lives of this family. Without any prior context or knowledge, I was instantly endeared and invested in the lives of this family. Some of the happiest moments in all of 2024 are in I'm Still Here. But you know that this happiness is fleeting. Slowly but surely, the darkness established in the first minutes seeps into the lives of this family. First with the phone calls, then with the blank looks from Selton Mello, and then he's gone. The film earns the bitter sadness you feel from Ruben's disappearance, especially communicated with Fernanda Torres' towering performance. In any other year, she would be my choice for Best Actress. Beautifully subtle in the ways she tries to hide her pain so as to protect her children from the pains of truth. She is quite literally the ultimate mother, always commanding the screen whether through her painstaking efforts to find the truth, or through her deep sadness that she spends the whole movie holding back. I also love how this movie deals with memory. Throughout the whole movie, the children document their life through a camera. This relates to the core of the movie, how we should try our best to never forget those memories and people that have left us. Not just people like Rubens, whose disappearance motivates Eunice to keep seeking for the truth, but to not forget the people who put him in this situation in the first place. We need to constantly be reminded of the injustices and the tragedy of the past, so as not to forget and be ignorant to those same returning injustices. I assume that for Brazilians, this movie is that reminder of their past. And for that alone, I commend I'm Still Here. I think structurally it's a bit messy. The pace never falters, but I felt that, especially with the prison sequence, the narrative gets slightly convoluted. And even though the ending with Fernanda Montenegro, the mother of Fernanda Torres, is super neat in that way, I never really thought it was all that necessary, as you could probably have ended the movie with the real sequence, a la Cinema Paradiso. But it still hits hard emotionally, as does the rest of the movie, making I'm Still Here one of the most emotionally affecting and necessary films, even to an American like me. 9 out of 10.
I am a master builder!
I unfortunately was only able to catch 3 of these nominees in theaters. Wicked, Dune 2, which is later on, spoiler alert, and The Brutalist. People like to throw around the word monumental a lot, and it is kind of applied to just every 3-hour epic these days. But man, does The Brutalist earn it. The first scene alone is earth-shatteringly good, and it made me glad I was watching this on the biggest screen possible. The Brutalist is that yearly historical epic period piece that cleans up at the Oscars, which is a turnoff for many casual viewers, but I promise you it is worth the hype and more. This is essentially 2 movies at once. On one side, it's Laszlo as an immigrant and the struggles of American life. And on the other, it's Laszlo as an artist, struggling to create meaningful work. In today's nativist society, it's important to remember that America was built and defined off the backs of immigrants throughout its history. I find it fascinating that the wealthy Harrison von Buren, who employs Laszlo, is fully unfazed when he removes Laszlo from his employment multiple times, only to keep rehiring him. It's an accurate depiction of how immigrants are commonly disregarded and yet needed in society. On the artistic side, it's also achingly modern, with the conflict between artists and patrons still unresolved, especially with the state of filmmaking today. It speaks to the difficulties of making art. Your vision is constantly being needlessly altered and restricted by those in power. You struggle to make a living, and the legacy of the art you put out is completely out of your control. Both of these sides of The Brutalist never overshadow the other, and the smooth blending of the 2 ideas really makes The Brutalist pack a punch. In addition to the filmmaking and the performances, some of the best direction, the best cinematography, the best production, the best editing, and the best score of the year. This movie is fully engrossing and perfectly paced because of this, making it feel like a new entry into the American epic canon, right alongside something like The Godfather or Once Upon a Time in America. And for $10 million? Are you kidding me? And the performances, my god. Adrian Brody really did earn that second Oscar. I guess he's really good at selling misery and pain as an actor, considering his role in The Brutalist is kind of similar to his role in The Pianist. Felicity Jones is tremendous as Laszlo's wife, and is a true scene stealer, especially to the end of the film. But the standout has to be Guy Pearce as Van Buren. He commands the screen every time he shows up, and when he's more calm and collected, you always have that slight fear that he can snap and become just as terrifying as he was in an instant. Maybe The Brutalist has been done before, what with the immigrant epic and troubled male genius, but I don't care. I've been starved for a great epic, and The Brutalist is that and more. It also is possibly the best ending of the entire year. A sudden, tone-breaking departure, with the sadness and acceptance of assimilation and artistic legacy depicted in a truly thought-provoking way. 9 out of 10. Full disclosure, I am not a horror guy. I scare easily, so for my sake, I stray away from horror. That's not to say I don't like horror movies. Sometimes I just need a good scare, and The Substance is that and more. It is the sickest, most depraved film of 2024. A fucked up version of All About Eve. Absolutely oozing in style and gore, this movie just keeps on getting more disgusting and gross as it chugs along, taking you on a wild ride that seemingly never stops. My compliments go to the director, Coraline Farge, the best director of the Best Director nominees. I know Best Director usually doesn't go for horror directors, or women directors, but I'm so glad she snuck in. The tensest, most claustrophobic direction of the year. So many incredible and vibrant shots reminiscent of Stanley Kubrick's work. Another director who really captures an unnerving, even horrifying atmosphere in his work. The tension builds and builds and builds, until it releases in a gloriously gory climax. This movie is also pretty wacky and over-exaggerated. I initially saw the lack of subtlety in how the script approached its ideas about beauty standards as a flaw, but thinking about it more, the lack of subtlety allows the movie to not waste its time in exploring its easily explainable theme and get right to the good stuff. This also allows the silly plot holes and over-the-top Dennis Quaid performance to fit right into the world of The Substance. That's not to say it's bad at saying what it wants to say. Beauty standards set upon women by a male-dominated world are just another way women have been neglected throughout history, and this fuels the anger that Farge has. And how have I not talked about the performances yet? I've already mentioned Dennis Quaid, whose unsubtleness allows for a truly vile, reprehensible person that you can't help but want to see brutally murdered. The casting of Demi Moore as the faded Elizabeth Sparkle just fits so well. You can tell she brings her own personal experience with a fading career to the role, and she is as magnetic as the role as she is terrifying. Going off the All About Eve comparison, every Margot Channing needs an Eve Harrington, and Margaret Qualley expertly plays her role as a literal scene stealer. If I had my way with supporting actors this year, it would be Grande vs. Qualley, and everyone else wouldn't have had a chance. These two meteoric performances are always at odds with each other, with both women being destructively hateful towards each other, and eventually both meeting a grim end. A truly poetic ending, representing how the industry pits women against each other. And that thing? All I'm saying is, it looked exactly like the grandma from Cookie Clicker. If you know, you know. No spoilers. 9 out of 10. Dune 2. What hasn't been said about you? Everything that could be said about Dune 2 has already been said. It's quite possibly the best sci-fi blockbuster epic in years. And this is 100% due to Denis Villeneuve. Villeneuve's sci-fi streak began with Arrival, and he truly just keeps hitting them out the park. If Arrival and Blade Runner 2049 are grand in vision and concept, then the Dune movies are on a different level entirely. Dune is the granddaddy of every sci-fi story since its release, and Villeneuve really shows why Dune is what it is. Just the way Arrakis is presented blows everything from something like, say, Star Wars out the water. The landscape of Arrakis is so expansive and atmospheric, and every technical aspect of Dune is top-notch in order to capture this world. The cinematography is so sharp and grand, dwarfing any other modern sci-fi film in comparison. The sets are so otherworldly and rich in design, sound is so particular and deafening, that I can still tell you what the worm thumper thing sounds like, to this day. I saw this movie 1 year ago. The effects, from the magnitude of the sandworm to the grand scale of the action sequences, it's all perfect. Some of those sequences, I was sitting there dumbfounded by how good they were. Like, you can't look at that gladiator scene on Harrigan and not just be gaping in awe. And the performances, good God. Timmy is straight up more deserving for a win in this movie than in the actual movie he got nominated for. He takes the curiosity and naivete of Paul in the first Dune, and transforms his performance into a more vengeful, more sociopathic Paul throughout the film. And it all works so well at turning Paul into the borderline villain the story as rich as Dune deserves. And the rest are no slouch either. Rebecca Ferguson and Austin Butler are both terrifying in their own special way, and they're easy scene stealers. I also love Javier Bardem as Stilgar, transforming from the capable leader of the Fremen into a man lost in his idolatry of who he thinks is God on Earth. It's beautiful. Maybe Christopher Walken shouldn't have been cast in the role that he was. Maybe I don't think Zendaya is all that good. But at the end of the day, these are just small blips in an otherwise perfect experience. 10 out of 10. I can't wait for Doom Messiah. I'd make a bet that Nickel Boys is the least talked about of the 10 nominees this year. And y'all are missing out, because this is an experience very rarely seen in the entire history of film. I know that sounds like hyperbole, but it is 100% true. The unorthodox choice to shoot this movie entirely in the first person is simple, and with a lesser filmmaker, it would seem gimmicky, but not Ramel Ross. He takes the idea that the camera tells a story to new heights. Every shot of Nickel Boys is breathtaking, with the slightest camera turn evoking deep and powerful emotion. Ross's direction is the greatest of the year, creating a whole new cinematic and visual language that will stand the test of time. Maybe it isn't the first movie to be shot in the first person, but I'd argue that Nickel Boys is the most notable movie to do this, so the point still counts. Everyone's yelling about Villeneuve not being nominated for Best Director, but me personally, I would nominate Ross 100 times before I'd even consider Villeneuve. Truly transcendent. And the story of the Nickel Boys is equally heartbreaking. I love the yin and yang dynamic with Elwood and Turner, where Elwood is the optimistic of the two, believing that change is possible and that they can help make change happen. Turner is the pessimist, hardened by his longer tenure at Nickel. And Nickel is an oppressive environment. Not in how cruel Nickel is to its prisoners, although stuff like the White House are truly gruesome, but really the core of Nickel is fear and dread, which are omnipresent even through the movie's most uplifting moments. The boxing scene is a perfect blend of euphoria and triumph, with a touch of dread and despair, as you know that this happiness is fleeting. It's even more heartbreaking to know that places like Nickel were absolutely real, and probably employed the same cruelty, a remaining shadow of America's tragic racial history. Despite this ever-looming tragedy, I love how slowly and patiently this movie goes. It's in the small, quiet moments that you endear yourself to Elwood and Turner, and it allows the relationship to evolve naturally, allowing later plot beats to hit as hard as they do. And to turn away from Elwood and Turner for a bit, the real standout is Anuise Ellis-Taylor as Elwood's grandmother. In only a few scattered scenes, she controls the screen, filling you with a deep sadness and a strong parental bond. And her final scene is utterly heartbreaking, as is the ending as a whole. A twist that was equally surprising as it was tragic, recontextualizing how I saw the entire movie. I'm not usually one to cry during a movie, but I don't see how you couldn't. Nickel Boys is a radically heartbreaking movie, being not only one of the most affecting films I've ever seen, but also a new way of filmmaking. I can't wait to see what movies will be inspired by Nickel Boys in the future. 10 out of 10. What could possibly be better than this? It's no secret that I love Anora and think it's the greatest of the year. Sean Baker is easily one of the great modern auteurs working today. The Florida Project is one of my favorite movies ever made, and Red Rocket isn't too far behind. I knew I had to temper my expectations going into Anora, as not only did I think it wouldn't be as good as those two, but I was worried that with a higher budget and a bigger audience, the aspects of Baker's movies that I love would be lost as he made a bigger movie. But I was so wrong. It contains everything I love about Baker as a filmmaker and more. Anora, like all of Baker's work, is an exploration of the underbelly of American society, seen through characters that live lives that we don't usually get to see, and in this case, the life of sex workers. While I can't speak on how accurately Baker captures the lives of sex workers, I can safely say that he knows how to capture the life of the working class and below. His almost deadpan, non-flashy filmmaking effectively captures the mundanity of life. The low pace, lack of background music, and naturalistic dialogue really sells the idea that this is grounded in reality, which allows for the heightened plot aspects to not betray the reality of Anora's life. The plot of Anora is essentially a subversion of the Cinderella fairy tale, where the story doesn't stop after Anora gets her fairy tale ending, but instead reminds us that fairy tales aren't real, and strips it away in a very meticulous manner until the magic finally wears off, and we're left to wallow in the mundanity once again. It's Into the Woods, it's the tale of the Princess Kaguya, it's Italian neorealism, and it's a reminder that the American dream is a myth, and unobtainable for the vast majority of Americans. Just like The Brutalist, Anora is the exposure of America's shortcomings and the relationship between the haves and the have-nots. In my history class, I've heard the term the Second Gilded Age thrown around as a title for our current time. And if that's true, then Anora is perhaps a defining film of our time. But it's not all doom and gloom. Anora is also one of the funniest and most entertaining films of the year. Baker takes the humor present in something like Red Rocket, makes a straight-up screwball comedy, culminating in the house scene. Oh my god, what a scene. Straight out of a Looney Tunes short with how absurd the situation escalates, and some fantastic physical comedy elements. And of course, the wedding scene. One of the most electrifying and soul-lifting moments in any movie, with an amazing needle drop to boot. All of Honora's success is brought to life on the back of Mikey Madison's star-making performance. Baker's protagonists light up the screen with their presence, being so charismatic and entertaining to watch, while also being incredibly flawed and short-sighted characters. And Honora fits right in alongside someone like Mikey Saber. Madison brings a fiery presence to Honora in all aspects. Often seductive, often spunky, often bratty, she fully embodies who Honora is. But I think what really makes this performance are the little things. I love the fact that she often feels aimless and lost around Vanya's friends, feeling like she doesn't belong. I love the way she holds back tears throughout the second half. I even love how many swears she uses. Not only is it in character for a person of Honora's morally dubious character, but it also shows her deep insecurity and how she tends to push people away or be untrusting and hostile to others. This insecurity makes the ending all the more tragic, as it shows how deep her emotional scars run from her experiences, and how she probably won't be able to open herself up after what she just went through. And Yuri Borisov's phenomenal nonverbal performance plays off Madison incredibly well. Honora is a practically perfect film, balancing the micro story of Honora and the macro story of modern-day America into this wonderfully crafted tragic comedy. I'm so glad that it swept the Oscars this year, as it deserves its flowers and more. 10 out of 10. If I could give it an 11, I would. And that's every nominee this year. Yeah. What did we learn? Not much. Okay, goodbye.